Hi everybody, it's Joyce here from Black Hair Compass. It's so early in the morning. It's so early. But nonetheless, here I am with a video. So I actually had something else scheduled for today, but I ended up watching a video earlier this week and I wanted to kind of touch on some of the topics that were brought up in it. I don't want to go into too much detail about what video it was, but it's from a person that's fairly popular in the lock community, and they were just talking about some frustrations that they were dealing with their locks, and I just wanted to kind of, go into a little bit more detail about it. And I guess what I should say is that their video kind of like spawned a conversation, at least on my comment, about a lot of the fears that exist around interlocking. So I wanted to make a video kind of dispelling some of those fears and going into detail about how interlocking works and how it doesn't work. So there are a lot of people who are super anti-interlocking. They're afraid of it. They think that it can cause their locks to be weakened and eventually fall off of their head. They think that interlocking can cause premature hairline receding, that it's going to just do a bunch of terrible things to their hair. And the sad part about it is that misinformation is very widely spread throughout the lock community, and it's just false. It's totally false. And the reason why I think it's important to touch on it is because there are people, real people, who believe this information, and it causes them real problems. Because one thing to consider is like twisting is an option if you're choosing to maintain your roots, but twisting doesn't work for every hair type. Not every hair type is going to be able to hold a retwist, and so it can make the lives of those people very difficult if they feel like twisting is their only option because they're afraid to interlock. So I wanted to kind of go over the dangers of interlocking one by one and just talk about it a little bit more. So one of the things that happens when you interlock incorrectly is you may create a hole. And I just want to emphasize that interlocking in and of itself does not create holes in your locks. Incorrect interlocking creates holes. And pretty much the way that interlocking works is like you would have a lock, and then you would pass it through the root of your lock and pull it out the other side. If you were to accidentally pass the lock through the roots in the same direction, you would have just created a hole. And the reason that it's important to understand the patterns of interlocking is there's like tons of monikers out there to kind of help you remember the pattern you should follow. There are 3 different interlocking patterns, but the most popular one is the 4-point interlocking pattern, which is you pass the lock through the roots in 4 different directions. And one of the easy ways to remember is north, east, south, and west. So you would go north, then east, then south, then west. And it's not that it's like really important, but it's just to remind you to go in a different direction each and every time. But there are some people who are new to interlocking who just don't have the information, and they'll just pass the interlock through their roots, not realizing that they're going in the same direction more than once, and they're creating lots of holes in their hair, and that's something that, or in their locks, and that's something that they won't really realize until way later on down the road. And when that happens, they tend to cry, interlocking is bad, when in reality, interlocking is not bad. It just can be bad if you're not doing it correctly, which is not really the fault of interlocking, right? That's more just doing incorrect interlocking. The next one is that the tension of interlocking can cause thinning. And this is a popular one that I see quite often. But again, I don't think that that's something that's at the fault of interlocking. If you truly understand interlocking and you understand the hair that you're working with, you should be able to determine what is an appropriate amount of tension. If your hair is tender to the touch, if it's difficult to sleep on, if over time you start to thin because of how tight you're interlocking, that's not interlocking's fault. That is a sign that the tension that you're putting on your roots via the interlocking method is inappropriate. I mean, I think again, we like to demonize interlocking and say, oh, it's so tight that it makes your hair thin. But I'm like, we also have to remember that you can palm roll your hair so tight that you palm roll it to oblivion and you can start to experience balding. You can get your locks styled so tightly that your hair starts to thin and potentially recede. You don't even have to have locks to experience that. You can there's some people who get micro braids and that tension along their edges is too much and eventually their hair falls down. There are people who get cornrows and that's too much tension and eventually they start to bald. So it's not really about interlocking versus anything else. It's about what is the appropriate amount of tension and are you exceeding that? I think that with interlocking, it may be a little bit more difficult to determine what is the appropriate amount of tension, because at least when you twist or palm roll, all you're doing is kind of like twisting the hair, and if it's too tight it will kind of like retract on its own. But with interlocking, once you've interlocked it, it's interlocked. So you have to have a proper amount of skill to recognize, okay, if I pass this through one more time, that's going to be too tight. And again, that's not really interlocking's fault. That's what's your skill level with interlocking? Do you know what is an appropriate amount of tension for the hair type that you're working on? The next thing is frequency. There are a lot of people who don't understand that interlocking is not like twisting. There are some people who get their hair twisted every 2 weeks. You would never interlock your hair every 2 weeks. You would never do that. Damian Walter suggests that you get your hair interlocked every 2 months. Yanni the lochologist recommends no more frequently than 3 months. People with Sisterlocks will usually get their hair interlocked every 6 to 8 weeks. It's a matter of finding what is the right frequency for you. And that frequency, regardless of who you are, would never be in a matter of 2 or 3 weeks. That would be entirely too frequent. So again, is that really interlocking's fault, or is that the person's fault for not really understanding how interlocking works and how frequently it should be done? I saw a video a couple of months ago where there was this loctician talking about how she doesn't support interlocking because, you know, she sees that people who interlock, they start having a receding hairline because they always want perfect, you know, edges, so they'll just like interlock the front too frequently. And I'm like, but again, that really shouldn't be a dig at interlocking. That should be a dig at these clients who are not exercising self-control to just allow their edges to be until it's rightly time to interlock their hair again. So yeah, I mean, I hope that this kind of like clears up some of the issues and some of the dangers of interlocking. I mean, speaking from personal experience, I've done both interlocking and twisting, and I have not seen a difference in the health of my hair. The length of my locks are interlocked and my roots are just now being twisted. But I mean, I may even go back to interlocking. It depends on how my hair progresses. But I just don't want people thinking that interlocking is dangerous, because it's not dangerous. Interlocking can be dangerous if you don't know your information, if you haven't done your research, if you're ignorant to all of the facets of the technique. There is quite a bit to know, but if you know it, then you're good. It may actually be a good alternative to you if twisting is just not working for your hair type. So yeah, I mean, I just wanted to kind of make a quick video. It's super early in the morning. I know I'm like kind of low energy, but yeah, I just wanted to come out and make this video because there's a lot of people that have hit me up and said, you know, I'm not really, this twisting thing's not really working for me, but I'm afraid to interlock. And I'm always kind of confused at that. I'm like, why? Like, why are you afraid to interlock? And it's kind of a shame because interlocking is really not that difficult. Once you take the time to learn it, you've learned it. And it's not that difficult. But if you really are just afraid to interlock your own hair, you can always go to a trusted professional. Go to someone with references that has current clients that can vouch for their work, and you can look at these people's locks for yourself and see if it's something that is satisfactory. But honestly, interlocking is not anything to be afraid of, and depending on your hair type, it may be more appropriate for you than twisting. So yeah, but as always, thank you guys for tuning in, and I will see you next time.